Last time I was in Sandton Church, I was in a brick building. So things are a bit different now, but the future looks good. I'm commending you on what I see on the back there. It was with Pastor Ian Hartley, that I was last here in Sandton Church. That was probably, was it late 80s, early 90s, somewhere back there? So it's been a long time since I was here, but it's good to be here, and I hope that I'll be able to come a bit more often now. And I hope I can squeeze in with the crowds on that side. Fill the place up, man. That's what our job is. If you'll forgive me, Pastor Hall mentioned I'm now the education director at the conference, but I'd like to talk about something a bit more important than education. So bear with me. Maybe if I come again, some other opportunity, I'll talk about education. But for now, I want to tell you 4 different things and then maybe try and tie them together. 2 parables and then 2 fact files. All right? First parables and then a bunch of facts. So 2 parables, 2 facts. First parable. It was many years ago. I was sitting with my family in Mug and Bean. Vegetarian, of course, and we enjoyed our meal. And when we were finished, I indicated to the waiter, I'll have my bill now. And the waiter went to the cashier point and punched the machine, and the computer came out with a strip of paper. And as he was walking towards me, he was stopped by somebody on a table along the aisle where he was walking. And I saw them talking and a bit of business coming on there. I don't know what was happening. I was sort of waiting now. Where's my account? And then he came to me and he said, that lady over there has paid your bill for you. So I said, thank you very much. A rather unusual looking lady. I would guess she was Irish, red hair, freckles, green eyes. But a very attractive young girl. Be that as it may, I thanked her, and as we walked out, I said, thank you very much. That was truly a surprise, etc., etc., and we went our way. No problem. But things started happening in our lives, and it's rather difficult to explain, but I'll do my best. I seem to be involved. I was getting a lot of things. I was getting help with my school fees, paying school fees for the kids. When I went to a shop to buy something, I would get discount vouchers. And I couldn't understand it. And often I would see this redhead. I never spoke to her. I didn't speak to her at that point. I hadn't seen her. But I'd see this redhead around, and I always wondered, what is going on here? And one day I was walking in town, and I found her, and I grabbed her by the arm. I said, listen, I'd like you to come and talk to me. When I went to inquire at the school about my school fees, they said a redhead had come and paid school fees for me. So I'm trying to figure out now what's going on. So I said, come, let's go sit and have a cup of coffee and decaf. Have a cup of coffee. And I want to ask you some questions. So we walked there was a spur there, we went in the spur. And we sat down, and I said, I'm not sure if I've got this right, but it looks to me like you are getting involved in my life. I want to find out what's going on, because you paid, first of all, Mug and Bean some time ago, but there's involvement. I keep hearing about this pretty redhead that's help. What's happening? So she looked at me and smiled. As I said, she was quite a pretty girl. And she says to me, all right, I'll tell you. She says, I'm not doing what I'm doing on my own behalf. I'm doing it on behalf of somebody else. Okay. Explain a bit more. She says, there's a very, very old, rich, extremely rich man who wants to help. And he's glad to help you. Thank you. No, that's okay. I enjoy it as much as anybody else. She says, in fact, he loves you. Now, at this point in time, I'm sorry I belong to the old school. But when a man tells me he loves me, my hair stands up if it can. And, you know, the thoughts go through your head so quickly. First of all, a man says he loves me. Then you tie it together, he's been giving me things. What does he expect of me? I stood up. It was almost a reflex reaction. So quickly, my chair crashed to the floor behind me, and I leaned over. I was going to smack her right out of that chair, and I was halfway through the motion when two thoughts suddenly came to my mind. The one is, she's a woman, don't hit her. The other was, it's sperm. Everybody was taking their phones out, and they're beginning to take pictures already. So I arrested that, and I looked at her, and she was looking me straight in the eyes, and she wasn't even afraid. And she says to me, it's not physical. Well, that was a relief. So I retrieved my chair and I sat down and I said, it's time for you to do some explaining then, because I don't know what's going on here. I'm not sure that I like it. So she told me basically the story. This old man wants to help. He really appreciates it. It's not a physical issue, but he wants the best for me. And he's not only picking on me, there's lots of people that he's helping. And he's doing all sorts of things. And I just work for him. I'm just one of his laborers. I run around and be the angel of mercy, or whatever you want to call it, to help those that are in need. And what I can tell you is that this hasn't ever stopped in my life. We came back from Zambia about 3 years ago. And the reason was, you can see I'm getting gray somewhere, and getting old and getting close to retirement. And I've been a missionary all my life, as Pastor Hall said, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Transkei when it was still a republic in those days, Zambia. We came back from Zambia because it's about time for me to find a place to settle when I retire. I don't want to be dependent on the church to find me a place to stay. We came to buy a home. We rented in Heidelberg, and I was working at the NCDT, the Northern Conference Development Trust, down in Three Rivers, looking after the old age homes and things like that, as Pastor Hall mentioned. We stayed we rented because we didn't know where we were going to buy, but we checked around and we found the places that we liked and the ideas, and I started sort of after 8 or 9 months, I started making inquiries with estate agents in the Three Rivers area. Between Three Rivers and Mayerton, there's a lot of small holdings. There's 2 hectare plots. I like being out in the country. I mean, I'm a missionary. I don't love living in the city. So I wanted to be out in the bush, and I left my name at a couple of places, but nothing really happened. There didn't seem to be any small holdings available. And we gave up on the small holdings, and a couple of months later, I'd identified a house in Three Rivers. We put up with the urban environment. We can handle it. We've done worse. And we were just at the stage where I was going to put an offer in for this house, when an estate agent phoned me and he says, listen, you left your name with me a couple of months ago for a small holding. Are you still interested in a small holding? So I said, yes, I would still like to have a small holding. So he says, there's one available. We made an arrangement a couple of days down the line to go and view the place. So a couple of days later, early in the morning, 7:30, we met at the office, and he says, I've good news for you. So I said, yeah, what's that? He says, the old lady that's selling the house phoned me this morning, and she's dropped the price. And she brought it down to our ceiling, where we were the maximum that we would be able to pay for a plot. And I almost said to him, where's the redhead? But that's number one. All right? Let's look at number 2, which is now said facts. I'm a scientist. Biology teacher. I got David through. Biology and science has been what I did while I was teaching before I got into administration. And to me, scientific fact is interesting. And I want to share one with you. It's a time of season where we're getting tired of the cold. I don't know about you, I am. And I'm looking forward to some rain. It's been dry, and you must see my yard. I bought that house, by the way. I've got a lovely lawn. It takes me 4 hours just to mow the front lawn, not the back one. So we've got this monster plot, but the grass is dry and brown and gray after all the drought and the dry and the frost. I'm looking forward to the rain. Now, if we could get 20 or 30 millimeters of rain, that'd be fine. But I'm just talking about, let's talk about 10 millimeters of rain, 1 centimeter. There's enough rain falls that it'd be 1 centimeter of rain. If 10 millimeters of rain fell on an area that was 10 meters by 10 meters, that's 1 ton of water. That's maths. Go and do the maths. Sandy, what is the dimension of this building? How many square meters is it? Do you know, offhand? Sorry. 30 by 20. So this is 60 square meters. 600 square meters. 600. So every 10 meters by 10, every 100 square meters is a ton. So if we had 10 millimeters of rain, then there would be 6 tons of rain that would fall on this building. That's a lot of rain. That's heavy. 6 tons. Now, if you invite me and say, listen, come and visit me, we've got tons falling out of the sky at my house, I'll say, no, don't worry, I'm quite happy where I am. But we've got this tremendous amount of water, weight of water that falls when it rains. And that's just 10 millimeters. I mean, 10 millimeters is hardly something to get excited about. When I get 50 or 80 millimeters of rain, then it's nice. But 10 millimeters of rain on 10 square meters, 10 meters by 10 meters, is 1 ton. And all of that water is up there in the sky. I think next time I go to OR Tambo, I'm going to ask for a submarine, not for an airplane, because there must be lots and lots of water. If you take 10 millimeters of rain per hectare, is 100 tons on 1 hectare. If you have a storm, a nice storm that's maybe 5 kilometers wide by 20 kilometers long, that's 1 million tons of water if you have 10 millimeters of rain over that whole area. When we put the numbers together, it's fascinating, incredible. And yet we have all of that water falling down, and we not only are not damaged, but we enjoy it. We're glad when it rains. That's number 2. The third one, another parable. And for this parable, I must tell you, I get it from a religious writer that I'm sure you have heard of, Philip Yancey. If you haven't heard of him, find his books. I find them very enlightening, very encouraging. And in a book that is called What's So Amazing About Grace, Philip Yancey tells us the story of a young girl. She lived in a place called Traverse City, which was north of Chicago in the United States. It was an urban, a small town with a rural environment. And she lived with her parents on a farm just out of town. And she was she was a normal teenager, which means she was a bit rebellious. And she didn't get on so well with mom and dad because they kept trying to stop her from doing the things that she wanted to do. And it went about the clothes that she wore and the friends that she had and the time she spent out away from home and the time she went to bed at night. The normal teenage routine problems. And one day, after a screaming fit with her father, she ran into her bedroom, slammed the door, sat down on her bed, and decided it was time to put into action an idea that had been formulating in her mind over a period of time. She was going to run away. She didn't need this tough environment that her parents were subjecting her to. So she packed her little suitcase with the most modern clothes that she had, left her teddy bear on the pillow of her bed, climbed out the window into the apple tree, down the tree, and walked down to the road into town. And late that night, she caught the bus that went to Chicago. Now, when most kids in America run away, they either go to California or they go to Florida. Those are the warm states. Those are the nice places to be. And she'd been thinking about this. She decided she's going to stay in Chicago. It was about 6-7 hours bus trip from her home. But if anybody was going to look for her, they were going to go look for her in California or Florida. They weren't going to look for her in Chicago. So she gets to Chicago early the next morning, sits down with her suitcase on a park bench, watching the world go by. Now, when you're just a teenager and you're alone in a big city, it can be daunting. First time away from mum and dad, and she's glad for it for now. But she's beginning to wonder what she's going to do next. She needs to find a place to stay. She's got to find something to eat. She's got a bit of pocket money that she's brought with her, so she's got a couple of dollars to keep her going. Should she book into a hotel, but the hotel will be very expensive. It'll use up her money too quickly. And she's sitting on this park bench on the side of the park, overlooking the sidewalk and the busy street, the cars going up and down, when redemption arrives. As they say in Afrikaans, a lang slap car, that big yank tank convertible, bright red with a white leather upholstery, pulls up and stops straight in front of her. And this good-looking guy at the steering wheel turns to her and he says, "Excuse me, ma'am, I see you've been sitting here for some time. I've been up and down a couple times. Is there anything that I can help you with?" And she thinks, first of all, the parents' concern, the parents' advice to her had always been, be careful of strangers. But she's now her own madam. She can come and go when she wants to and do what she wants to. So she says to him, "Yeah, I'm just deciding which hotel I'm going to stay in because I need a place to stay." And the driver, who she didn't realize is a pimp, says to her, "I've got a big place. I've got a spare room. Come and stay with me." Well, adventures. So in the car, she hops, goes to his place, stays with him. She started off in a room of her own. It wasn't long before she was sharing his room. She was a young girl, as I say, barely a teenager, but she was fairly well developed. And of course, the pimp saw things in one direction. And apart from sleeping with him, he started bringing friends around, and it became a way of business. In fact, she was prime goods because she was underage. And her friend eventually, didn't take too long, set her up on a top floor of a block of flats. She had the penthouse all to herself. She could come and go as she wished. She could eat what she wanted. She could buy what she wanted because she was now a lady of means. She was being paid well. She could indulge in what my mother-in-law calls barbed wire fashions, which means fashions that protect the property without spoiling the view. And she made a lot of money for her boss. And life was great. But she did have what we all have, a conscience. And it did bug her. But she found that she could control's not the right. She could suppress it with alcohol and with drugs. So she was making a lot of money and she was sliding down a one-way road. And she stayed in the penthouse for many a month, a couple of years even, and did great business. And she just had to control that, suppress that conscience, and do the best that she could. She thought of home every now and then and wondered if she'd made the right decision, but with the alcohol and the drugs, she was able to persuade herself she'd made the right choice. But alcohol and drugs make a difference in your life. You don't stay the way you start. And it was a couple of years down the line, and big handsome Johnny comes in and he says to her, listen, you are now past your sell-by date. Get out. Just like that. She still had her little brown suitcase, and she packed her fashion clothes in there, and she had to get out. But she had a job. She knew how to work. And she carried on her life on the streets of Chicago, where it was more difficult because the customers didn't come to you. You had to find them. And things got tougher, and drugs became more expensive, and she needed more of them. And it got to the stage where she was really having a hard time. That was bad enough. But when winter came, winter doesn't go very well with miniskirts and tank tops. And when she got to the stage where she was fighting with other street people for a place to sleep, to wrap herself up in cardboard boxes to try and stay warm, she realized she was probably needed to go back home, because she knew she had a bed there and her teddy was on the pillow and she would be warm. But she was scared. She'd made a decision to run away. During this time that she was in the penthouse, she got a big fright one day, because when she poured milk on her cereal one morning, she found her picture on the side of the milk carton. In America, they've got a campaign. Missing kids have their pictures printed on the side of milk cartons. The milk doesn't come in plastic bottles like ours. There's square waxed cardboard cartons. And she found her picture there. And for a moment, she was panic-struck, and then she realized that nobody would ever link that picture with the way she looked now. But she knew that at home it was warm, and here on the streets it was cold. A couple of times she decided to phone home and find out if she could come back, and she'd get halfway to the call box and turn around and come back. She just couldn't build up the courage until it started snowing. When you have to fight for a place to sleep in the streets, and you're fighting in the States, all the buildings are naturally air-conditioned, and all the hot air-conditioned air gets pumped through a system, out a duct, out of a vent in the sidewalk. You've all seen the picture of, what's her name? Marilyn Monroe, with the hot air blowing up from the streets. And when she started fighting for a place on one of these hot air vents just to keep warm during the night, she realized that she probably didn't have an option. She phoned home, and there was an answering machine. And she just said, Mom and Dad, I'll be on the midnight bus arriving Thursday night. And she hung up. With the last money that she had after a fix, she bought the ticket back to Traverse City. And along the way, she suddenly realized, man, what a stupid move. She had made arrangements with an answering machine. What if Mom and Dad were not there? What if they were gone on holiday? I mean, it's 2 years since she'd seen them. What if they're out of town or they're on holiday and she's expecting to find them? She gets there and they're not there, and she doesn't know whether they don't want her or whether they haven't got the message or what. But she had no option. She couldn't turn around. She didn't have money for a bus fare back home again, back to town. She drove through. The bus came into Traverse City late at night. Got out of the bus, and as she walked into the waiting room, there was a monster banner across the back of the room. Welcome home. Mom and Dad, uncles and aunts, neighbors, school kids, all jumping around and shouting and whistling and carrying on and waving. She couldn't. Dad came out. Come, my darling. Dad, I can't. Come, my dear. Dad, I'm on drugs. Come, my dear. We love you. We're glad you're back. For the fourth one, let me refer to my notes here because there's numbers here that I cannot remember out of the top of my head. I'm a biology teacher, as I told you, and I've always been interested in the facts and the details, the scientific details. And if you look up, you can get all of this on Wikipedia and on the internet, so there's nothing amazing except putting them all together. We live for an average, let's just call it 70 years. I know in South Africa, women expected life expectancy is 67 and men is 64, but let's just call it 70 years. 70 years is made up of 3,600 weeks or 25,000 days. That's the average lifespan if you're living for approximately if you live for 70 years. Our bodies are made up of 37 trillion cells. Now that number trillion is difficult. We can understand 100, 1,000, 1,000,000. A billion is 1,000 million. A trillion is 1,000 billion. When we teach, I'm coming back to the education, I can't get away from it. When you teach, and you teach a child a new concept, you've got to anchor it onto something that they can identify with. You build on the knowledge that they have. You can't bring something out of the blue that it gives them, that they can't attach somewhere. Let me try and attach this for you. That 37 trillion. If we are talking about seconds, now we know how long a second is, okay? We deal with them fairly regularly, and we know how long a second is. 1,000,000 seconds is 11.5 days. 1 billion seconds is approximately 37 years. 37 trillion seconds is 1.173 million years. Forget seconds, let's try something else. Rice. You know rice. It's one of my favorite starches. I took a packet of tastic rice and I counted it. Not the whole packet, but you do it scientifically, of course. 1 million grains of rice is about a 20-kilogram bag. Okay? Now we know you buy them, the big bags are normally 10 kgs of rice. 2 of those is 1 million grains of rice. 1 billion grains of rice is about 20 tons. 37 trillion grains of rice. If you have a train with a carriage, 40-ton carriage, and each train had 40 carriages full of rice, to get 37 trillion grains of rice, you need 450 trains like that. Millimeters. We know how long is a millimeter. That big. 1 million millimeters? Kilometer. No, we know what a kilometer is, no problem. 1 billion millimeters? 1,000 kilometers. That's from here to Beaufort West, Laingsburg somewhere, down the N1. We can identify with that. 37 trillion millimeters. Around the world at the equator 975 times. Are we maybe beginning to understand what a trillion is? Let me give you a last one, 100 rand note. I've got one. 100 rand note. If I have 1,000,000 rand in these, 1,000,000 rand in 100 rand notes will fit into a medium-sized suitcase. Okay, 1,000,000 rand. 1,000,000,000 rand would be half of this floor a meter deep in these. 37 trillion? A rugby field 15 meters deep in 100 rand notes. Listen, I don't know if we can grasp what 37 trillion is, other than it's a phenomenally large number. That's how many cells you and I have in our body. Incredible the way that we were made. Of these 37 trillion cells that we have in our body, 300 million, now even that's a big number, but 300 million cells die and are replaced every second. 300 million every second. The lung surface of inside my lungs, where gaseous exchange takes place, is almost the size of 2/3 of the floor here. I breathe 50,000 liters of air every day, more than 1 billion liters in my lifetime. My heart beats 100,000 times per day. It's 500,000 tons of blood in my lifetime. My kidneys produce 1,600 liters, process 1,600 liters of blood every day. You blink? How often? 6 million times a year. Did you ever think about it? You swallow 1 liter of saliva every day, and you produce 10 liters of digestive juices every day. Your stomach acid is so strong that it can dissolve steel. And why doesn't it break down the stomach wall? It does. Remember, there's 300 million cells that are replaced and die every second. Some of them, a lot of those are in your stomach. Everything that you ever see or sense is stored in your brain. Now let me say that again. Everything that you ever see or sense is stored in your brain. They did an experiment with the young lady. They put electrodes into her brain and stimulated those electrodes. She relived a concert that she had attended 17 years before. And while she relived that experience, she could hear the music, she could see the musicians, she could smell the people around her, she could taste the popcorn she was eating. It was all stored in there. And the question that I asked myself is, what do I put in? Because it doesn't come out, it stays there. You have 10 times more bacteria than cells in your body. So if you've got 37 trillion cells, you've got 370 trillion bacteria. But because bacteria are smaller than cells, they could probably fill up a 2-liter bottle. Now, most bacteria in your body are actually good for you. There's very few that are harmful if you consider the whole process. So don't get worried about all that bacteria. It is good for you. My skeleton is totally replaced every 10 years. They've got little cells that go through the bones in your body, eating up the bone. And little cells coming along behind them, depositing new bone. So in 10 years, the bone that you have now is not the bone that you had 10 years ago. But even more amazing, my skin is totally replaced every 27 days. They say that in an urban environment, now this doesn't apply where we live down there in the failed Driehoek with all the pollution, but in the normal urban environment, most of the dust in your house comes from skin cells that are brushed off as your surface of your skin dies. It's got to be replaced in 27 days. It's got to go somewhere. I have been created in such an incredibly phenomenal way that even today, with hundreds of thousands of scientists working on the physiology of the body, they don't know how it works. That was number 4. Let's try and tie them together. I've got a big daddy who loves me. He cares for me. He interferes in my life, but for my good. Even though I don't like the messengers that he sends, at times I want to smack them. I can say that, the pastor's out. But it's for my good. I've got a God that pours out rain in such a way that I look forward to it. It's tons and tons that fall on my head, on my roof. But it's done in a way that I enjoy. I've got a God that loves me so much. Doesn't matter what I've done. Doesn't matter where I've come from. Doesn't matter how I've rejected him. Doesn't matter. Name all the sins you want. But he loves me. And he wants me back home where I belong. I've got a God who created me in such a way that even today man is unable to determine all the rules, all the regulations, all the methods, all the physiology of my body. But it's created in an incredible fashion. My question is, so what? Is that the way we deal with the situation? Okay, thanks. Cheers. I'm going to do what I want. Is that the way we live? A God who has such a vital interest in me as an individual. Can I just palm it off? You do what you must, I'll do what I want to. Is that the way I live? Am I under an obligation? And I don't like the word obligation. To relate to him differently because of his love to me. Obligation has the connotation of something that I must do. Is that the way I relate to my God? Because you love me, I must go to church, pay my tithes, refrain from pork, dancing, name them all. Do you respond to love with an obligation? Am I obliged to my dear wife because she loves me? No, I don't like that word obligation. But because she loves me, I willingly do something for her. I willingly sacrifice my own interests for hers. I willingly, and not only willingly, with great joy, try and bring joy to her. And if she has needs, if she has expressed something that she wants, it is to me natural that I'll try and find a way of giving her that. Your God loves you. How are you going to respond? There's a text. I've got a couple of texts, but we're only going to read one of them. 2 Corinthians 2, verse 15. For we are to God the fragrance of Christ among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. We are the what? We are to God the fragrance. What's a fragrance? Smell. What kind of a smell? Sweet smell. There's no fragrance next to the sewage farm. There's no fragrance when the sewage pipes get blocked and it runs past on the ditch outside the house. That's not fragrance. Fragrance is a, that's nice. What you wearing? Chanel? It's something sweet, something nice, something that you want to enjoy. We are to God the fragrance of Christ to who? Among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. How do I relate to a God that loves me so? Am I the fragrance that other people will say, that's nice. I want some of that. Yes, I like that. God loves you. Don't ever forget it. Let's turn to our closing hymn, number 321. 321 in the SDA hymnal.
My Jesus, I love thee. I know thou art mine. For thee all the follies
Father in heaven, we sometimes don't realize what you've done for us. Forgive us. Thank you for the death of Jesus. Thank you for the way you bless us each day of our lives. Thank you for all you do for us. Thank you for your love to us. Dear Lord, may we today have appreciated it a bit more than we might have in the past, and react accordingly. Bless us, dear Lord. Go with us now, we pray. In Jesus' name.